生まれた陸眼のガキを面白半分で見に行ったことが後にも先にも背後に立った俺が気取られたのはこの時だけだった。だから削った。
Welcome to another collab review video, this time for the long-awaited collab, Demon Slayer. This returning collab has a lot of strong new units, and a few older units that got nice buffs, but obviously the elephant in the room is Muichiro, as he right off the gate will surpass Kurotobi as the strongest leader. But he'll quickly face some tough competition from Hunter x Hunter Speedround, who should arrive shortly after Demon Slayer is over. But even if you have no interest chasing for Muichiro, I'd be inclined to pull in this machine because there's so many strong subs and equips. Stick around and find out who they are. And remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy these type of videos. Like any other RAM, there's always a bunch of cards that have little to no use, so I'll quickly glance over them in a speed round. And even though I'm saying some of these units are not that good, do not sell any of them. Unfortunately, Demon Slayer came right before Gung-Ho made garbage exchanges more commonplace. By this, I mean something like exchanging 15 low rarity units for a higher rarity one. If Demon Slayer comes back again, we'll probably see something like this one on the next run. First up, I'll talk about Hantengu, who is a farmable unit. He's honestly not the worst. He's got a lot of utility with his resist and team HPs, and can also help out recovering assists. I would try to at least skill one up, even though he'll have limited uses. He could work with leaders with raw HP multipliers, since Hantengu's active can allow you to survive some big gravities, and can also deal with enemies facing your HP. These type of leaders have fallen out of fashion, but it's not a bad idea to max heal one Hantengu, just in case. Okay, and now for the RAM units. Tamayo and Hanegesuka are completely useless as subs and equips. They don't bring any damage or utility to the table, so I can't really see anyone using them. Sabito and Makomo are also pretty useless. I think on release they were considered good as you could system 4 of them and make a swipe team, but there's much better options nowadays that are farmable, like the recently buffed Nidhogg. Obviously different playstyles, but you can also system 4 of them and do way more damage. I guess it's not a bad idea for new players to keep them in mind, but most likely they'll become box shielders as the equip is pretty bad too. The only good thing about Sakonji is his active, but no, not the equips. His base form has a pretty nice fixed damage multi-targeting button active. At 5 million it's not the highest, but it's still pretty good, especially if you don't have something like this. Enmu is a very underwhelming option to deal with attribute and damage absorption, as their active has a slightly higher cooldown than you would usually want on a 2-turn void. At least the equip gives you some bulk and utility along with a 3-turn delay. Genya has a 1-turn attribute and damage absorption void active that also gives you a special loop in roulette. But the active's cooldown is a bit too long and the roulette colors are not really desirable at the moment. Bartending Toka uses these colors, but you wouldn't really wanna run Genya since he doesn't offer much apart from 6 possible skill boosts. Genya's equip is not total garbage due to its 2 killers. Only a handful of similar equips exist at the moment, but just because it's kinda rare, it doesn't mean it's necessarily that good. Yushiro's a pretty bad unit, and his equip is okay at best. It does give you some bulk and a box, though you probably wouldn't like to skill it up as the active is pretty garbage. Base Giyu could be a decent cleric for blue box teams, since he can do a decent amount of damage, but he doesn't bring any Hilo Ease to the table or other desirable utility. 8-star Giyu has an interesting loop in roulette and +4 combo active, that also has a 100% damage void shield, but that 12-turn cooldown is way too high. Even if it were shorter, there's not that many teams that actually need this type of active. His Aura gives you 2 full resist and some OEs, which is not bad, but Hades equip is a more accessible option since you probably won't be relying on either equip's actives and you can ignore that. His sword is definitely more interesting as there's only 2 other 7C and box equips out there, and NA doesn't currently have access to one of them, and probably never will. The blue sub attribute Awakening and the lack of effective skill boost is a bit unattractive though. Karaku could serve as a 7x6 leader for swapping, but with only 4 10Cs, he does no damage in super gravity dungeons. His active could be useful to fix board strings, but it's hard to justify choosing him instead of other options that bring more damage or utility. His equip is somewhat decent as he has 2 effective skill boosts and 2 full resists. The green sub attribute Awakening and lack of bulk awakenings might not make this attractive. Urogi has an okay damage multiplier in super gravity dungeons, and it's much better in moon dungeons. Unfortunately, his active is not that desirable. He won't really carry his weight in dungeons where he could do damage like in UN6, and his equip is pretty lackluster as he has no bulk, skill boost, or a useful active. Sekido can only do a modest amount of damage in moon dungeons, and his conditional active is not that bad, but could be unusable depending on your board. He kinda works in a Tengen team, but his role is already taken by Gilgamesh Kerr, who brings a lot more utility. And his equip could, again, work in a Tengen team, but it only offers 3 effective skill boosts without any bulk, and the damage from its awakenings is not that significant. Isetsu could do a nice amount of damage in blue box teams, say like Muichiros, but Muichiro already runs near Watatsumi, who has a better active than Aietsu and does way more damage. Isetsu is somewhat similar to Sophisam and Hecate, and most of the time you probably want to run those other two since you get a lot more utility from them. Isetsu is definitely passable, but you might have better options for the type of role he plays in teams, and his equip is pretty garbage. Beishinobu is a unit with a looping auto heal active. Obviously she's not as good as Charisma Celica, since she also handles board strings, and Shinobu's orb generation probably won't be all that desirable. Maybe her poisoning will be impactful once Gonho decides to include an enemy with low HP and a high shield, but until then, Beishinobu won't really stand out, and maybe there's better poison actives out there. I didn't bother to check because that mechanic has not been relevant at all for a long time. Her A-star evolution has a decent 1-turn attribute and damage absorption void active, but the board change is irrelevant at the moment. Merom and Pitu are 2 poison leaders, but they generate their own orbs, and would probably be better off including a sub with more damage potential, more utility, or at the very least a 2-turn active. Both of her equips are pretty okay delays with 2 team HPs. The Haori has a decent amount of utility, while the sword is more offensive focused, with those 2 killers and poison blessing. Kano can do a decent amount of damage in a dark PvP team, but her active really sucks, so I struggle to see where you would use her. Thankfully her equips are at least good. Her coin has 5 effective skill boosts, but it comes with almost no bulk. Her sword is a good mix of utility, bulk, and damage, at the cost of only having 2 effective skill boosts. Her sword can be a really good equip on a Dark Transform unit with a high damage multiplier that has a non-dark sub-attribute like Merom and Goten. Demon Slayer only has 3 exchangeable units, but you can only use GFEs and some high-rarity units from Demon Slayer. I don't really see a lot of value in Musan or Rengoku, so I would most likely skip the exchanges, unless you really see a use for them. Musan is still okay for having some easy dungeons, and probably tackling some ranking dungeons as he has done so in the past, but outside of that he can't really handle much more since his active cooldown is way too high. The 9-star Evo is garbage, as it lacks damage potential, and the active cooldown is also way too high. Rainbow teams want low cooldown board changers, and if they want a 7x6 active, there's units out there with much lower cooldowns. The outfit is pretty bad too. It's kinda meant to be used for dark farming teams, but this equip doesn't even generate, at the very least, a brick of dark orbs, nor does it give the equipped unit a high damage multiplier. Rengoku is not as bad as Musan. His base form does a decent amount of damage in red PvP teams. His active has a low cooldown, so you could make a system with 3 of them, but Metal Enterprise exists, and that unit already generates a box, so you don't have to bother matching orbs. His 9-star Evo could be an okay fire cleric, but like with any other damage-oriented cleric, you'd want to bring a different unit to bring utility since he doesn't have any. And honestly, he doesn't do that much damage to begin with. His Haori is okay, but after a match most recent buff, I don't see why you would want to run this Haori instead of a match since the 7C is non-conditional on HP and it also gives an extra effective skill boost. I guess the Haori is better for a swipe team that won't face any preemptives and wants to minimize combo animations. His new Evo has the same damage multiplier as the base form, but he plays a much better role. He has a decent 2-turn void attribute and damage absorption active, which is on par with other units since it's a 7-turn cooldown. On top of that, he's not a bad red box and break leader, since he does give Fu and plus combos in his leader skill. Rengoku's new equip is okay for red swipe farming, and the damage cap break and double killer might come in useful to one-shot specific floors. I don't know where to use this, maybe some of the low teens monthly quests with Shiba Dragon. I don't really hold this equip in high regard, since it's probably overkill for the type of content a red swipe team would probably handle. I wouldn't really feel like exchanging for Musan or Rengoku, but if you were simming in Demon Slayer fodder after chasing Muichiro, then maybe getting one of each might not be the worst idea. But yeah, I wouldn't waste GFEs on either of these. And that's it for the speed round. Now I'll go a little more into detail with these following units. The first one is Inosuke. All of his forms have a pretty high HP stat, but the base form doesn't really do that much damage and doesn't really stand out with his active. The 8-star Evo has a lot more utility and is actually used for dungeons like Cold UN2 as a New Year Norris leader. but New Year Norris has other leaders like Green One Yu and Sylvie, so he doesn't necessarily need Inosuke. He has a looping shield active, and those are always nice to have, but the origin in his active may be detrimental to your team, as he might take away orbs you might need if you're not running a team that makes use of the wood orbs. The first equip was extremely good on release, but it didn't really get a significant buff. This equip is pretty decent to stack up on team HP, but suffers from not providing more effective skill boost. The new Inosuke Evo generates the same amount of orbs as the previous form, but it instead has a piercing active on a 3-turn cooldown. But again, who needs wood? As much as Gonho tries to make wood TPAs happen, they are not catching on, except for the new bartending Toka, but she won't really have any use for Inosuke since she herself has a pierce active. Inosuke's new equip is interesting. It has a decent damage multiplier and utility, but the active is not that good. At first sight, the damage break looks promising, since high defense spawns are becoming more commonplace, but all the high damage dealers are usually transform units with their own damage breaking actives. And even if they don't have one, having to wait 14 turns after transformation to raise your damage cap for only 3 turns is just a major pain. Kotetsu is a decent cleric with a lot of focus on utility. He has a good amount of Ls, so he's really good for recovering assists, and he has a pretty quick cooldown, so he's not a bad cleric option. His equip is pretty garbage though. It only has 1 team HP and no other useful awakenings with no effective skill boost. At the very least, using Kotetsu as your leader to clear the Demon Slayer Colosseum gives you access to this free equip, which is not at the same level as the airship from Final Fantasy, but it's still okay. I don't think anyone cares about the awakenings, but in the near future, its damage multiplier will be doubled. That still doesn't really make it good, but maybe one day a unit will make a decent use of it. Nezuko is a decent enough cleric for dungeons where you need to quickly tackle a walk-in bind and unmatchable debuffs, but be wary that she doesn't fully clear them. She only handles 7 turns at a time on a 3-turn cooldown. Her active also has a looping auto heal effect, which is not that high at 20%. It won't be enough to keep your team alive, but it can provide some relief to teams that struggle to heal or to somewhat counteract RCB debuffs. She also has some decent utility with her double L and Cloud Awakenings, so not a bad cleric overall. Unfortunately, she doesn't have any heal OEs, like most good clerics do, so one of your other subs will have to patch that up unless you're running a different auto heal loop, but then Nezuko's active might override that loop, and if not properly timed, you'll die. Her first equip is very similar to Seine's story equip. Seine's is more offensive focused, but with Nezuko's you have the advantage of being able to freely Evo and de-Evo to Nezuko's other forms without worry, since Seine's equip requires a unique Evo mat. Her new evolution is more in line with what I come to expect from clerics, though this one doesn't have that much utility outside her heal TPAs. Those 4 10Cs are wasted since they don't give her meaningful damage, even if you were to make a red box. She does have a full cleric active that also allows you to clear any attack debuffs and also handles damage absorption on a 5-turn cooldown. This reminds me of Little Misaka, who has the same 5-turn cooldown, but with slightly worse active and awakenings for a cleric. Little Misaka has her uses with regular Misaka and Aki. Overall, I don't really see Nezuko shining as a cleric due to her awkward mix of utility and damage awakenings. Her new equip has pretty good utility, but there's been other Cloud and Tape equips coming out recently that might be more accessible, like Alato Course equip. Zohakuten on paper is a really amazing 3-color unit. It has an insanely high damage multiplier and can fully take advantage of that. He should work really well in UN6 because of his Moon Awakening, but he doesn't offer much utility, nor does he come with the Guard Break Awakening. This can be easily solved with an equip. He has a really good leader skill, as it is 5x to all stats for devils, and it also gives you bonus combos and Fua. A common pairing for him is Kano and Kuron, but the few times I've seen him being used lately is as a sub in Rainbow teams. His equip is pretty solid with its bulk and other awakenings, but I wish he had more effective skill boost. It might be too greedy to ask for that, but compared to the rest of the equips coming up next, it's weird that this equip is not as broken as the remaining ones in this collab. Tanjiro is the 3rd and last unit you can exchange for in this collab. He essentially has a 10C built into his attack stat, so with 4 10C awakenings and a BDP+, he can do a pretty respectable amount of damage. You can also create a system with 2 of them, but it really sucks that his active does not give you at least 9 red orbs, so without Skyfall Lock or another orb changer, Tanjiro will struggle to output a lot of damage. Also, not to mention he won't be able to generate orbs if your board gets flooded with water and or heal orbs. He's not a bad leader for red teams, but as a unit himself, he doesn't bring much to the table. And Exhibit A is his useless Guard Break Awakening. One interesting use for him is to turn him into an auto heal unit. You can do this with a Valentine Noah team. B Noah gives you 1 turn hates every other turn, so if you put an auto heal equip on Tanjiro, ideally Pito's equip, You'll be able to close the loop without any downtime. Outside of that, base Tanjiro is not that strong or interesting. His earring is okay only because he gives you 4 effective skill boosts. His new Evo has pretty much the same damage multiplier when you choose the box plus Super Awakening, and it also works as a decent red leader since he gives you Fua and plus combos. And not to mention this leader also works with Valentine Noah. His new sword equip is really good. It's 3 effective skill boosts, 2 team HPs, and 2 really good killer awakenings. There's a few equips out there with this combination of killers, but Tanjiro's equip is definitely the strongest due to the team HPs and effective skill boosts. Zenitsu's base form, sucks. There's really no sugarcoating it. He does no damage and has no utility, and that active is laughable. He'll never get anywhere close to hitting 7 billion. His first equip is really bad too. 3 TPAs and 1 team HP might have been decent in the early Daywolf days, but those awakens are pretty bad at the moment. The equip's active is also lackluster. Even though it is 1 effective skill boost, the rest of the active effects are very situational, and like I mentioned previously, I don't see much value in damage cap break equips, at least for now. So yeah, he's really bad, but the reason why he's a good pull is his new equip and evolution. The 8-star evolution is amazing for light PvP teams like Aggregate and the new GFE in JP, Nova. He does a respectable amount of damage and has a pretty good amount of utility. His active is really good. It has a lower cooldown than the traditional 2-turn Void attribute and damage absorption active. And on top of that, it gives you a bunch of light orbs, fixes move time, and ensures he'll be able to do a significant amount of damage with his sub-attribute. His equip is similar to the Slime Trio's equip, but this one comes with a team HP and a 4-turn charge instead of 3. This is an insane equip for light teams. Definitely keep all the Zenitsu copies that you can get. Next is Daki and Gyutaro. They didn't really shine on release in JP, despite having a leader skill that's very similar to Kurotobi's. Their shortcomings were due to a lack of asymmetrical pairings and her active. While 2 of them do essentially give you a looping shield, you'll have to bring 1 more orb generator for every other turn, since you'll die without activating your leader skill. But the introduction of Bartending Toka and Graces have given this unit new life, since they are the asymmetrical pair lead and orb generator that Daki and Gyutaro were missing. This type of team can clear Unit 6 very fast, so if you're interested in running Bartending Toka, try to get at least 1 copy of Daki, or 2 if you don't want to rely on friends. Standalone Gyutaro is okay, but he doesn't really see any use in Bartending Toka teams for UN 6. This is probably due to needing an insanely high damage multiplier, and he doesn't have one, even when taking into account the Moon Awakening. Even so, he's a solid unit with 6 skill boosts, and he can handle attribute and damage absorption. On top of that, his active could indirectly tackle RCB debuffs. It's not the best way to do it, but it's a way. Daki's belt is an amazing equip. Equips with 3 team HPs and haste are pretty rare. That alone makes it great. And on top of that, you get some OEs and a tape resist. Just very solid overall. Tengen is another leader similar enough to Kurotobi, but unlike with Daki and Gyutaro, you won't have to wait to see his full potential. He has the same damage awakenings as Kurotobi, and a similar enough active that might let you ignore Orb Enhanced Awakenings, at the cost of raising their damage cap to 5 billion instead of 6 like Kurotobi. Tengen also doesn't have scaling plus combos or attack boosts like Kurotobi does with every TPA match, but his leader skill is more than good enough to tackle super gravity dungeons. He can pair with Christmas Featheret or Mitsuri, and I think he's better suited to handle old UN5 than Kurotobi due to the second floor in that dungeon. But eventually he'll probably struggle with damage output in dungeons like UN6. I have seen clears of him, but for that type of dungeon, it's him scaling leader skills and higher damage breaks are the way to go. So for beyond UN6, he's probably not gonna age as well as Daki. His equip is pretty decent. On top of 2 team HPs and 2 TPAs, it has a non-insignificant number of finger awakenings, along with a 3-turn delay. But a bunch of leaders in this collab and in the future, like Bartending Toka, come with fixed move time leader skill. So if that's the way power creep is moving, this equip might also not age that well. But for the time being, Tengen is a really strong leader with a pretty decent equip. Mitsuri is the new orc skin that you're unable to purchase. As I mentioned before, she pairs really well with Tengen. She gives you fixed move time, plus combos, and brings the much needed follow-up attack that Tengen needs. Her damage multiplier isn't that high. 510 Cs is not enough these days, but for now, it's good enough for endgame content in NA. Another downside is that she doesn't break her damage cap, so she won't be able to carry her weight damage-wise in endgame dungeons released after all DN4. Regardless, she's still an amazing looping shield option, since on top of having a shield, she also helps you recover from RCP debuffs and gives you a special roulette. Having tape resist on a unit could also be pretty handy. There's a few endgame floors that you encounter back to back where enemies void assist and then give you tape, and this could be very dangerous for some teams. The UN6 boss does these 2 things simultaneously. In short, Mitsuri is a solid leader and looping shield, but I think she might not age that well as a unit. The main reason why I hold her in high regard is her equip. It has 5 effective skill boosts along with Zomois. Those alone are pretty great. But in addition, this equip has 2 of the most useful killer awakenings in the game. Every single boss in the UN Dungeon series is a dragon, and devils are common encounters as well. There are only 2 other equips with these killers, and this is obviously the better choice because of its useful active and having no drawbacks. So even if you have no interest in Tengen teams, she's an amazing pickup for her equip. Next is Gyokko, an incredibly strong blue BDP leader. Unfortunately, his active doesn't work well with the BDP leader, Muichiro, but he can stand on his own 2 feet as a leader, and you can create a system with 3 copies of him. With his Moon Awakening, he's more than well suited to tackle UN6, but I mostly see him being used as a leader for blue swipe teams, like Aki and Valentine Noah. But what I like most about this unit is his equip. There's only a handful of 2 skill boosts and 2 team HP equips out there. His is the only equip that has more than 2 effective skill boosts, as he gives you a whopping 4 turn haste. This can definitely help you transform some of the newer transform leaders, or other transform leaders like Aggregate that have more than 1 transformation. Even if you can't make the haste work due to the equip's high cooldown, it's still a great equip since it gives you 2 skill boosts, 2 team HPs, and some OEs. Next is Akaza, who's one of the best rainbow leaders in the game at the moment, only rivaled by the new Toy Dragon trio. Rainbow teams are becoming more and more popular due to high defense enemies popping up more and more, and with Akaza's Guard Break Awakening, insane attack stat, and 7 billion damage cap break, he'll pretty much be doing 21 billion damage every other turn, and this will be more apparent in moon dungeons like UN6. He's usually paired with Raffin Kitty, but can also work with other Devil Rainbow leads that preferably add combos. The Bartending Rem will bring Jin and Tonic, and Bartending Batty, who do just that, so Akaza will definitely stick around because it seems that Rainbow is here to stay, at least for the next 2 months. His equip is okay, even though it has 2 killers, these are not as useful as the ones in Mitsuri's sword. If you manage to roll 1 or 2 of Akaza during the first run, and you don't care about Tengen or Muichiro, maybe it's not a bad idea to skip Demon Slayer and save up for Band Tenders and the new GFEs. But you would be missing out on a lot of strong equips from this collab, so it's a tough question. And finally, the big chase from this collab, and the one to finally dethrone Kurotoji as the strongest leader. Muichiro doesn't care about enemies messing with your board, since with 3 of them, you will pretty much always have the perfect amount of orbs. He doesn't care about bringing Pierce actives, since you can make boxes to bypass void shields, and with his leader skill, he doesn't care about time debuffs either. But the price to pay for all of these amazing things is the 32 turn cooldown on his base active, and the other big price to pay will be however many stones it takes you to get at least 2 of him. In JP, he's only rivaled by P2 from Hunter x Hunter, which should come shortly after Demon Slayer is over. In my previous video, I shared these team compositions, and since then I have become aware of 2 new Muichiro subs that are very accessible, Bolden and Hatsune Miku. Bolden got a recolor Evo that works really well as a pixel G replacement. I would consider Seras to be accessible, but maybe you're missing this cleric. Thankfully, during the next Hatsune Miku Super Gadfest, we should be getting a free copy of every single Hatsune Miku unit, and Hatsune Miku herself has a new cleric evolution that could work in a Muichiro team. She only has 2 skill boosts, but free is free. There's 5 other Sensei equips with 1 or more team HPs in the game so far, and Muichiro's equip is the one with the most effective skill boost, so due to this equip, maybe some won't stop at 3 copies of Muichiro, and to those I say thank you for keeping the NA server afloat. So to summarize, Demon Slayer brings a bunch of strong leaders and subs to the game, along with a sleeper one that will just remain in your monster box until the arrival of the Bartending Rem. While Muichiro is the main chase here for many, there's a lot of amazing pickups from this machine that have stood the test of time in JP. What's my source? A tweet from a Japanese player that I randomly saw on my timeline. No, but really, a handful of these equips are insane and will work wonders in a lot of current and future teams. Usually equips tend to age better and not get power creep that fast. Hopefully Gung-Ho doesn't decide to amp up the power creep levels even further beyond. So if you feel comfortable with these rates, definitely not a bad idea to roll in Demon Slayer, even if you don't care about the elephant in the room, Muichiro. Some of these units and equips will be hard to replace in something like future Bartending Tuoka and Nova teams. If you decide to roll, I wish you all the best and hopefully you get what you want. Alright, that does it for this video. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below, and remember to like and subscribe for more Path content. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.